My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the daughter my parents forgot they had. I don't mean that literally. They remember to feed me, to make sure I had a roof over my head. But when it came to the things that mattered, the moments when a child needs to know they're loved, protected, valued, I learned very early that I was on my own. I grew up in what looked like a normal family from the outside. Middle class, suburban neighborhood, 2 parents, 2 daughters. The kind of family you'd see in a Christmas card. But inside that picture-perfect frame, there was an unspoken truth that shaped everything. My younger sister Emma was the light of their world, and I was just there. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. I convinced myself that being independent was a strength, that not needing anyone was something to be proud of. I became very good at taking care of myself, at asking for nothing, at disappearing into the background. But independence forced upon a child isn't strength, it's survival. And 13 years ago, when I was 15 years old, sitting alone in a police station at 2 in the morning, I learned exactly what my place in my family really was. This is the story of what happened that night and everything that came after. The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter like an accusation. Cream-colored cardstock, elegant script, gold embossing that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, my coffee going cold in my hand, unable to look away from the words printed there. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Mitchell request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Emma Rose Mitchell. 250 guests, the grand lakeside pavilion, 5-course dinner, open bar. My mother had mentioned the venue once during one of her rare phone calls. Casual, like it was nothing, like planning a wedding that probably cost $40,000 was just something people did. But it was the handwritten note tucked inside the invitation that made my hands shake. Sarah, we hope you'll come and be happy for your sister. Family means everything. Love, Mom. Family means everything. I set down my coffee cup carefully, afraid I might throw it. 13 years. It had been exactly 13 years since the night that taught me what family really meant to them. And here was my mother, writing those words as if they hadn't left me alone in the one moment when I needed them most. The memory hit me like it always did. Sudden, vivid, inescapable. I was 15. It was a Friday night in October, just after 9 o'clock. I'd gone to the mall with my best friend Melissa, or the girl I thought was my best friend. We were just browsing, killing time the way teenage girls do. I didn't know that Melissa had been shoplifting. I didn't know she'd been slipping makeup and jewelry into my bag while I was distracted, looking at art supplies I couldn't afford. I didn't know until the security guard grabbed my arm. Everything after that was a blur of fluorescent lights and accusations. Mall security, real police officers, handcuffs. They found $400 worth of stolen merchandise in my backpack. Melissa was gone. She'd disappeared the moment the guard approached us, leaving me alone to face the consequences of what she'd done. They took me to the police station. Juvenile detention processing. I was terrified, shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone when they finally let me make a call. I dialed my parents' number with trembling fingers. It rang 4 times before my mother answered. "Mom?" My voice cracked. "Mom, I need help. I'm at the police station. They think I stole something, but I didn't. I swear I didn't." "Sarah." Her voice was tight, annoyed. "What are you talking about? What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. Melissa put stuff in my bag. I didn't know." "You're at a police station?" I could hear noise in the background, music, applause. Sarah, we're at Emma's dance recital finals. This is the biggest night of her life. Why would you call us right now? The words didn't make sense. I was 15 years old, sitting in a police station, and she was asking me why I called. Mom, please. I'm scared. I need you to come get me. They said, "Figure it out yourself, Sarah." Her voice was cold, final. "We always knew you'd embarrass us eventually. Don't call back. We have tickets, and we're not leaving Emma's big night for this." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at it, waiting for it to ring again, waiting for her to call back and say she didn't mean it, that they were coming, that everything would be okay. The phone never rang. I spent that night in juvenile detention. A narrow bed, scratchy blanket, the smell of industrial cleaner and fear. Other girls crying in nearby cells. A youth advocate named Mrs. Chen finally helped me in the morning, pulling security footage that proved I hadn't known about the stolen items, that Melissa had deliberately set me up. They let me go with a warning and a lecture about choosing better friends. My parents picked me up at noon the next day. They didn't hug me, didn't ask if I was okay. My father drove in silence while my mother stared out the window. When we got home, all she said was, "Next time, be more careful about the company you keep. We won't bail you out again." There was no again. They hadn't bailed me out the first time. Emma had won her competition. She came home with a trophy and flowers and our parents' pride. I came home with the knowledge that when it mattered most, I was on my own. I blinked and I was back in my apartment, holding the wedding invitation. 13 years, and I could still hear my mother's voice on that phone. Cold, dismissive, choosing my sister's dance recital over their other daughter sitting terrified in a police station. I looked around my small one-bedroom apartment, modest, clean, everything I'd built by myself because I'd learned very early that no one was going to build anything for me. I'd worked 3 jobs through college. I'd earned my degree in accounting without a penny from my parents. I'd created this life through sheer stubborn determination not to need anyone. And still, they called when they needed money. And still, some pathetic part of me answered. I picked up the invitation again, studying the details. The Grand Lakeside Pavilion. I'd looked it up once, months ago when my mother first mentioned Emma's engagement. $15,000 just for the venue rental. The dress Emma had posted on Instagram was designer. I recognized the label. $4,000 at least. My parents had told me 3 months ago that they were stretched thin financially. That's why they needed to borrow $2,000 for a mortgage payment. I'd sent it the same day, like I always did. They'd been planning this wedding the whole time. The handwritten note mocked me. Family means everything. I thought about not going. I thought about sending a polite decline, maybe a gift card, disappearing back into the role I'd always played, the responsible one, the independent one, the one who didn't make waves or demand anything. But something was different this time. Maybe it was turning 28 and realizing I'd spent more than half my life trying to earn love from people who'd made it clear I wasn't worth their time. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying their financial emergencies while they planned lavish parties. Maybe it was just that I'd finally reached the limit of what a person can endure before something breaks. I looked at the invitation one more time, at my mother's handwriting, at the expensive cardstock and gold embossing. I was going to that wedding, but not as the silent, invisible daughter they expected. For the first time in my life, I was going to stop protecting them from the truth. Section 2. Childhood and family background. To understand why that wedding invitation felt like a knife, you have to understand how I became the kind of daughter whose parents could abandon her in a police station and sleep soundly that night. It didn't start with cruelty. It started with circumstances, with timing, with the small daily choices that add up to a childhood. I was born when my parents were 22 and 23, young, unprepared, barely keeping their own lives together. My father was working construction, long hours for modest pay. My mother had dropped out of college when she got pregnant with me, her dreams of becoming a teacher postponed indefinitely. I have early memories of our old apartment, the one before we moved to the suburbs. Small, cramped, thin walls where I could hear my parents arguing about bills late at night. I learned to be quiet, to not ask for things, to make myself small so I wouldn't add to their stress. My mother used to say I was an easy baby, never cried much, slept through the night early. As I got older, I stayed easy, entertaining myself, doing my homework without being asked, helping with chores before anyone had to tell me. I thought that's what good daughters did. I thought if I was helpful enough, quiet enough, responsible enough, they'd be happy. Then Emma was born, and I learned what actually made them happy. I was 5 years old when my mother came home from the hospital with my baby sister. By then, things were better for our family financially. My father had been promoted to a supervisor position. We'd moved to a real house with a yard. My mother had gone back to school part-time. Emma arrived into stability, into a version of my parents who weren't constantly stressed and exhausted, into a world where there was enough money for the extras, enough time for attention. I remember holding her for the first time, this tiny, perfect thing, and feeling something I didn't have words for yet. Not jealousy exactly, more like a question. Why didn't they look at me the way they were looking at her? Emma was different from me in every way that seemed to matter. Where I was quiet and careful, she was bright and fearless. She started talking early, full sentences that made adults laugh and coo. She was naturally graceful, the kind of child who drew eyes when she entered a room. I watched my parents fall in love with her in a way they'd never fallen in love with me. It wasn't loud. They didn't sit me down and say, "We prefer your sister." It was subtler than that, woven into 1,000 small moments that taught me my place. Emma's baby photos covered the walls, professional shots, expensive frames. My baby photos were in a box in the attic. When Emma turned 3, they threw her a birthday party with a bounce house and a dozen kids. When I turned 8 that same year, we had cake at home with just the 4 of us. "We can't afford everything," my mother said when I asked about a party. "You understand, right? You're a big girl now." I was 8 years old, and I was already too old to ask for things. Emma started dance classes when she was 4. Ballet, tap, jazz, she loved it all. And she was good at it, naturally good. The kind of good that made her teachers pull my parents aside and say things like real talent and potential. I asked for art classes that same year. I'd been drawing constantly, filling notebooks with sketches and stories. My second grade teacher had mentioned that I had a creative eye. "Art classes are expensive," my father said, not looking up from his newspaper. "Maybe when you're older." Emma's dance classes cost $150 a month. Art classes cost $80. I stopped asking. I learned to check the prices of things before I wanted them. I learned that Emma's activities were investments in her future, and my interests were hobbies that could wait. I learned that "we can't afford everything" actually meant We can't afford everything for you. Family photos told the story clearly. In every picture, Emma was centered, front and center, perfectly positioned, her smile bright and natural. I was always at the edge, sometimes half out of frame, my smile awkward and uncertain. My mother would arrange us for photos, moving Emma into position with careful attention, then glancing at me and saying, "Sarah, you're fine where you are." I became very good at being fine where I was, at being half out of frame, at being the daughter who didn't need attention, who didn't ask for things, who understood that her sister's light was brighter and therefore deserved more of the room. But here's what I need you to understand. I didn't hate Emma. I couldn't. She was sweet to me, genuinely kind in the way that only someone who's never had to fight for love can be. She shared her toys. She asked me to play with her. When she was old enough to notice that I didn't have the things she had, she'd offer me her clothes, her art supplies, her snacks. "You can have it," she'd say, generous and innocent. "I have lots." She didn't understand that the inequality wasn't about stuff. It was about being seen. Emma was 7 and I was 12 when I started babysitting to earn my own money. The neighbor down the street needed someone to watch her kids on Friday nights. $5 an hour. I took every shift I could get. My parents praised this. "Look at Sarah, so independent and responsible," my mother would say to friends, like my independence was a choice I'd made rather than a necessity she'd created. I bought my own school supplies, my own clothes from the thrift store, my own birthday cake one year when they forgot until the day after. They didn't forget Emma's birthday. Ever. I want to be clear about something. My parents weren't monsters. They didn't hit me. They didn't scream at me. They provided food and shelter and the basic requirements of keeping a child alive. But emotional neglect doesn't leave bruises. It leaves something harder to see. A hollow space where love should be. And a child who learns that her worth is measured by how little she needs. I became the easy daughter, the one who didn't complain, the one who solved her own problems. And they mistook my silence for contentment, never realizing it was resignation. By the time I was 13, I'd learned to celebrate Emma's victories as if they were my own, because that's when my parents were happiest. I cheered at her dance recitals, I helped her practice, I braided her hair before competitions. If I couldn't make them proud of me, at least I could help them be proud of her. If you've ever been the overlooked child, the one who learned to make yourself smaller so others could shine brighter, you understand this. Tell me in the comments, did you learn to celebrate others while silencing your own needs? Because I'd like to know I wasn't alone in this. My childhood taught me a truth I'm still unlearning. That love is something you earn through usefulness, through not being a burden, through taking up as little space as possible. That truth shaped everything that came next. The teenage years are when you start to understand things your childhood self couldn't name. When the vague feeling of being less than crystallizes into concrete examples you can't ignore anymore. I was 13 when the favoritism stopped being something I could explain away. Emma was 8, and her dance career, because that's what it had become, a career, was consuming our family's entire existence. Every weekend was a competition or a rehearsal. Every dinner conversation revolved around her routines, her teachers, her upcoming performances. My parents' calendar was color-coded, pink for Emma's events. There was no other color. I had a science fair that year, 7th grade, and I'd worked for 3 months on a project about water purification systems. It wasn't flashy, but it was thorough. My teacher, Mr. Harrison, had told me it was one of the best projects he'd seen in years. The fair was on a Saturday in March. I'd reminded my parents a dozen times. I'd marked it on the kitchen calendar myself. That morning, my mother was rushing around the house packing Emma's dance bag, ironing her costume. I was already dressed, waiting by the door with my project carefully packed in the car. "Mom," I said, "we need to leave in 20 minutes." She looked at me blankly. "Leave for what?" "My science fair. It starts at 10. Her face changed. Not quite guilt, more like inconvenience. "Sarah, Emma's competition is today. It's regionals. You know this has been planned for months." "My science fair has been planned for months too." "But this is regionals." She said it like I was being deliberately difficult. "Your father and I both need to be there. Emma needs our support." "I need your support too." The words came out quieter than I meant them, almost a whisper. My mother sighed, that particular sigh that meant I was being unreasonable. "Sarah, you're 13 years old. You're old enough to handle this yourself. Have one of your friend's parents give you a ride. Emma is 8. She's the one who needs us right now." I took the bus to my science fair. I carried my project on my lap, careful not to let it tip. I set it up alone while other kids had their parents helping them, taking photos, beaming with pride. I won second place. Mr. Harrison shook my hand and told me I should be proud. I called home from the school's office phone to tell them. My mother answered, distracted, loud music in the background. "That's wonderful, honey," she said, her voice bright but distant. "Emma got first place. We're all going out for dinner to celebrate. There's leftovers in the fridge for you. We'll probably be home late." She hung up before I could respond. I took the bus home. I ate cold pasta alone at the kitchen table. I put my second place ribbon in my desk drawer where no one would see it. When they got home that night, laughing and happy, Emma's first place trophy already had a spot cleared for it on the mantel. No one asked about my day. That pattern repeated itself in variations for years. My small art exhibition at the local community center, missed because Emma had a dress rehearsal. My 8th grade graduation, where I gave a speech as class representative. They arrived 20 minutes late and missed it because Emma's private coaching session ran over. Every time I tried to say it hurt, I was met with the same response. "You're older. You should understand. Emma has real talent. This is her chance." Real talent. As if my art wasn't real. As if my achievements didn't count because they weren't as flashy as a dance trophy. I started to believe them. I started to think that maybe I was ordinary, that maybe Emma's light really was brighter, that maybe some people were meant to be seen and others were meant to watch. The financial inequality became impossible to ignore too. Emma's dance career was expensive. Costumes that cost hundreds of dollars and were worn once, private coaching at $60 an hour, travel expenses for out-of-state competitions. I wore the same pair of shoes for 2 years until the soles had holes in them. When I finally mentioned I needed new ones, my mother took me to a discount store and told me to pick something under $30. That same week, Emma got custom-made dance shoes that cost $150. I started babysitting more. By 14, I was watching kids every Friday and Saturday night, plus some weekdays after school. I used the money to buy my own clothes, my own school supplies, my own lunch when the cafeteria food was too expensive. My parents praised my independence. "Sarah is so self-sufficient," my mother would tell her friends. "She never asks us for anything." They didn't understand that I'd learned not to ask because the answer was always no. Or worse, it was, "We can't afford everything," followed immediately by writing a check for Emma's next workshop or costume or competition fee. The emotional neglect was subtler but cut deeper. I struggled with anxiety in high school. panic attacks before tests, difficulty making friends, a constant feeling of not being enough, of taking up space I didn't deserve. I tried to talk to my mother about it once. I was 14, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while she cooked dinner. "Mom," I said, "I think something's wrong with me, like in my head. I feel anxious all the time and I can't sleep and..." She said, distracted, stirring something on the stove. "You're probably just stressed about school. Make sure you're getting enough sleep." "No, it's more than that. I think maybe I should talk to someone, like a counselor or..." "Sarah, I don't have time for this right now." She glanced at the clock. "Emma's rehearsal ends in 20 minutes and I still have to pack her dinner. Can we talk about this later?" Later never came. My father was even worse. He was physically present, came home for dinner, sat in his chair, watched TV, but emotionally, he might as well have been a ghost. He hid behind his newspaper, his work stress, his exhaustion. I could count on one hand the number of real conversations I'd had with him. The times he'd looked at me and actually seen me, not just acknowledged my presence. Emma was his princess. He lit up around her. He knew every detail of her dance career, could recite her competition scores, her teachers' names, her goals. He didn't know what grade I was in half the time. I felt invisible in my own home. I'd walk into a room where my parents and Emma were laughing together, and the laughter would continue as if I hadn't entered. I'd try to join conversations, and my words would fall into silence, unacknowledged. I learned to move through my house like a ghost, quiet, unobtrusive, barely there. I learned that needing attention was weakness, that asking for love was pathetic, that the only way to have value was to be useful without requiring anything in return. I helped Emma with her homework. I made her lunches. I covered for her when she forgot things or made mistakes. I became her second mother, the one who took care of the details while our actual mother managed Emma's career. And still, I wasn't seen. The night of the shoplifting incident, when I called from that police station terrified and alone, wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of 15 years of being told in 1,000 different ways that I didn't matter as much as my sister, that her needs came first, always, that I was expected to understand, to be mature, to handle things myself. I was 15 years old, and I'd spent my entire childhood learning that my pain was less important than Emma's convenience. A light going out in a room I'd been waiting in for 15 years. They never apologized. Not for leaving me there, not for choosing a dance recital over their daughter's crisis, not for anything. When they picked me up the next day, the car ride home was silent, except for my mother's one statement. "Next time, be more careful about your friends. We won't bail you out again." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. They hadn't bailed me out. A stranger, a youth advocate named Mrs. Chen, who'd stayed late because she saw a scared kid who needed help, had done what my parents wouldn't. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to ask them how they could live with themselves. I wanted to demand an explanation for why Emma's dance recital mattered more than their other daughter sitting in a police station. But I didn't say any of that. I'd learned by then that my words disappeared into silence, that expressing hurt was treated as causing drama. So I stayed quiet, and I started planning. I was 15 and a half, 2.5 years until I could leave. I counted down the days like a prisoner marking time. I got a job at a local diner that would hire me under the table. Weekends and some afternoons, washing dishes and bussing tables for cash. I saved every penny. I opened a bank account my parents didn't know about, walking to a branch 2 miles from our house to make sure I wouldn't run into anyone who knew them. I studied harder than I'd ever studied before. I needed scholarships. I needed a way out that didn't depend on them. My grades had always been decent, but I pushed them higher. I stayed late in the library. I took every extra credit assignment. I turned myself into the kind of student colleges wanted. At home, I became even quieter, even more invisible. I did my chores. I helped with Emma. I attended the mandatory family dinners where everyone talked about Emma's competitions and no one asked about my day. I was polite, compliant, easy. And I counted the days. I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA and a full scholarship to a state college 3 hours away. My parents came to the graduation ceremony. They took photos. My mother cried and told people how proud she was. I felt nothing. I moved out 3 weeks later. My belongings fit in the back of my beat-up car that I'd bought myself with the money I'd saved. My father helped me carry boxes into my dorm room, but he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. Emma had a summer intensive starting the next week. My mother hugged me goodbye. "Call us if you need anything," she said. I knew I wouldn't. College should have been my freedom, and in many ways it was. I was away from the house where I'd felt invisible, away from the constant reminder that I was the daughter they'd settled for. I worked 2 part-time jobs while taking a full course load. I studied accounting because it was practical, because it meant job security, because I'd learned that I needed to take care of myself. I made a few friends, not many. I'd never learned how to trust people easily, but enough. People who didn't know my family, who didn't have preconceived ideas about who I was supposed to be. I should have been happy, or at least at peace, but I couldn't fully let go. My first year of college, my parents called maybe once a month. Brief conversations where my mother asked if I was doing okay, and then immediately launched into updates about Emma's dance career. Emma was 15 now, competing at national levels, being scouted by prestigious dance companies. I said the right things. I congratulated her achievements. I asked interested questions. I told myself I didn't care anymore. Then, during my second year of college, my parents called with a different tone. "Sarah, honey." My mother's voice was strained. "We need to talk to you about something." Emma had wrecked her car. She was fine, not hurt, but the car was totaled, and insurance was only covering part of it. They needed to get her a new one quickly. She needed it for getting to rehearsals, to competitions. "We're a bit short right now," my mother said, and I could hear the careful calibration in her voice. "With all of Emma's expenses, things are tight. We were wondering if you might be able to help us out. Just a loan. We'll pay you back." I should have said no. Every reasonable part of me knew I should say no. But that desperate, still hoping part of me heard something else. They needed me. For the first time in my life, I had something they wanted. Maybe this was how I could finally matter to them. I was 19 years old, working as a junior accountant intern, making barely enough to cover my own expenses. But I had savings, $3,000 I'd been putting aside since high school. I gave it to them. They promised to pay me back within 3 months. They thanked me profusely. My mother said, "You're such a good daughter, Sarah. So responsible." Those words shouldn't have meant anything, but they did. 3 months passed, 6 months, a year. I never saw that money again. It became a pattern, a toxic, predictable pattern that I couldn't seem to break. Every 6 months or so, my phone would ring, my mother's name on the screen, and I'd know before I answered that they needed money. My father needed emergency dental work, $1,500. They were behind on the mortgage because business had been slow, $2,000. Emma needed to attend a prestigious summer program, $1,800. Each time, they explained their financial hardship. Each time, they promised to repay me. Each time, I transferred the money. I was 24 and working full-time as a staff accountant. I made a decent salary, enough to live on, enough to start building a real life. But I kept my apartment small, my expenses minimal, because I knew the next call would come. And it always did. My friends would ask why I didn't have savings, why I couldn't afford to go on trips with them, why I seemed stressed about money despite having a good job. I made excuses. I was paying off student loans. I had unexpected expenses. I was saving for something big. I didn't tell them the truth, that I was financially supporting my parents and sister while living on a fraction of what I earned. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the hope. Every time I sent them money, I told myself this time would be different. This time they'd see my value. This time they'd acknowledge what I was sacrificing for them. This time I'd finally be enough. But nothing changed. When I sent $2,000 to help with their mortgage, my mother called 3 days later to tell me about the expensive photography package they'd just booked for Emma's portfolio shoot. When I sent $1,500 for my father's dental work, I saw photos on Facebook of them taking Emma to an out-of-state competition the following week. They never asked Emma to help financially. She was pursuing her dream. She needed support, not burdens. I was the reliable one, the one with a real job, the one who could handle it. Emma didn't know about the money I sent. My parents never told her. I think they were embarrassed, or maybe they just wanted to maintain the illusion that they were the ones supporting their talented daughter's career. I kept records of everything: bank transfers, text messages, emails where they asked for money and promised repayment. I told myself I was being smart, protecting myself, but really, I was collecting evidence of my worth, proof that I mattered to them, even if it was only as an ATM. Over 6 years, from age 22 to 28, I gave them just over $22,000. $22,400 to be exact. I knew the number because I'd calculated it late one night, going through my bank statements, adding up every transfer. $22,000 I'd earned through long hours and extra shifts and saying no to things I wanted. $22,000 they'd accepted without question, without gratitude that lasted longer than the phone call, without ever once paying me back. I never demanded repayment. I'd mention it sometimes, carefully, and they'd say things like, "Of course, as soon as things stabilize," or, "You know we're good for it," or, "We haven't forgotten, don't worry." But the money never came, and still I kept giving, because every time I considered saying no, I'd remember being 15 and alone in that police station. I'd remember every missed event, every forgotten birthday, every time I'd been made to feel invisible, and I'd think, maybe this time will be different. Maybe if I'm helpful enough, needed enough, useful enough, they'll finally love me the way they love Emma. I was 28 years old, and I was still that little girl half out of frame in the family photos, still hoping that if I just made myself valuable enough, they'd finally see me. The truly devastating thing? Deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't love me less because I wasn't giving them enough. They simply didn't see me at all. And no amount of money was going to change that. But I couldn't stop hoping. Not yet. Not until something broke that final, fragile thread of hope I'd been clinging to. The phone call from my doctor came on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. I was at work, finishing up a quarterly report when my phone buzzed. Dr. Martinez's office. I stepped into an empty conference room to take the call, expecting it to be routine. A follow-up about some tests I'd had done the week before, after experiencing persistent abdominal pain. "Sarah," Dr. Martinez said, and something in her tone made my hands go cold. "We got your test results back. I need you to come in to discuss them. Can you make it in tomorrow?" "Just tell me now," I said. "Is it bad?" There was a pause. "You have a large ovarian cyst that needs to be removed surgically. It's benign, not cancer, but it's causing the pain you've been experiencing, and it needs to come out soon. Waiting could lead to complications." Surgery. The word echoed in my head. She explained the procedure, the recovery time, 6 to 8 weeks of limited activity, and the cost. Even with my insurance, I was looking at about $6,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. $6,000 I didn't have because I'd sent it all to my parents. I thanked her, scheduled the surgery for 6 weeks out, and sat in that conference room for 20 minutes trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't scared of the surgery itself. I was scared of being alone through it, of recovering alone, of facing something this big with no one to help me. For the first time in years, I wanted my mother. Not the mother I actually had, the one who forgot my birthdays and missed my achievements. I wanted the mother I should have had. The one who would drive me to the hospital and hold my hand and make sure I was okay. I knew better than to expect that, but some stubborn, hopeful part of me decided to try anyway. I called her that evening, after putting it off for hours, after talking myself into and out of it a dozen times. She answered on the third ring. "Sarah! Hi, honey, what's up?" "Mom," I said, and my voice cracked slightly. "I have to tell you something. I went to the doctor and they found something. I need surgery." "Oh, no." Her voice shifted to concern. "What kind of surgery? Are you okay?" I explained about the cyst, about the procedure, about the recovery time. As I talked, I could hear noise in the background. Voices, music, the clink of dishes. "That sounds scary," she said. "But you said it's not cancer, right? So that's good." "Yeah, but I'm still scared. And the recovery is going to be hard. I was wondering if maybe you or Dad could help me after the surgery, just for the first week or so. I'll need someone to—" "Oh, Sarah," she sighed. "Honey, that's in 6 weeks? That's the beginning of June." "Yes." "We can't. That's right when we're in the middle of Emma's wedding planning. The wedding is in August, and June is when we're doing all the final preparations. The menu tasting is that week, and we have the final fitting for Emma's dress, and—" "Mom," I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "I need surgery." "I know, and I'm sorry, but this is terrible timing. Can't you reschedule it for later? After the wedding?" I closed my eyes. Dr. Martinez said it needs to happen soon. Waiting could cause complications. "Well, I'm sure it can wait a few months. You're young and healthy. Besides, you've always been so strong, so independent. You'll be fine. You always are." That word again. Strong. Like it was a compliment instead of a life sentence. "I don't want to be strong right now," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "I want help. I'm scared, and I'm going to be alone, and I need—" "Sarah, listen to yourself. You're being dramatic. It's outpatient surgery, right? You'll be home the same day. People have these procedures all the time. That doesn't mean I want to face it alone. You're not alone. You have friends, don't you? Ask one of them to help you. Friends. Like a friend could replace a parent. Like asking a colleague to care for me post-surgery was the same as having my mother there. I tried a different approach. Mom, I've helped you guys financially so many times, for years. I've given you thousands of dollars when you needed it. Can't you help me now when I need you? Her tone changed instantly, became defensive. We never asked you to give us that money. You offered. And we've had our own struggles, Sarah. Don't make this about money. I'm not making it about money. I'm asking for help, for support. And I'm telling you we can't right now. Emma's wedding is the priority. Surely you can understand that. There it was, the truth laid bare. Emma's wedding, a party, a celebration, was more important than my health crisis. I should have been used to it by now. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. Every single time, I was still surprised by how little I mattered to them. Okay, I said finally. Never mind. Forget I asked. Sarah, don't be like that. You know we'd help if we could, but our hands are tied right now. We're stretched so thin financially with the wedding. Financially? The word came out bitter. You're stretched thin? Yes. The deposits alone have been, how much is this wedding costing? I don't see how that's, how much, Mom? She hesitated. About 40,000. But that's with all the... I hung up. My hands were shaking. $40,000. They were spending $40,000 on a wedding while telling me they couldn't help me because they were financially stretched, while owing me $22,000 that they'd never intended to repay. I sat there on my couch, phone in my lap, and felt something crack inside me. 2 weeks later, the wedding invitation arrived. Cream cardstock, gold embossing. The Grand Lakeside Pavilion, 250 guests. And that handwritten note from my mother. We hope you'll come and be happy for your sister. Family means everything. I stared at that invitation for a long time. Then I did something I'd never done before. Something that went against every instinct I'd developed over 28 years of being the good daughter, the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves. I started asking questions. It started innocently enough. I ran into my parents' neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, at the grocery store. She'd known my family for years. "Oh, Sarah," she said warmly. "Your parents must be so excited about Emma's wedding. And what a relief that they refinanced the house when they did. Your mother mentioned they got such good timing on it." My smile felt frozen. Refinanced? Yes, about 2 years ago, I think. She said it really helped them financially. Smart move with the market the way it was. I thanked her and finished my shopping in a daze. That evening, I did what I'd never thought to do before. I looked into public records. Property records were available online. It took me 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. My parents had refinanced their house 2 years ago. They'd pulled out $65,000 in equity. $65,000. 2 years ago. Right around the time they'd called me, crying poverty, asking for $2,000 for a mortgage payment they supposedly couldn't make. My vision blurred. I read the numbers again, certain I'd made a mistake. But there it was. Documented. Official. They'd received a substantial payout, and they'd continued to tell me they were broke. They'd continued to take money from me, money I'd struggled to save, money I'd given up things for, while sitting on that cash. I pulled up my bank records. I cross-referenced them with texts and emails from my parents. $2,000 they'd asked for 3 months after the refinance, claiming they were behind on bills. $1,800 they'd needed for Emma's summer program, 6 months after the refinance. $1,500 for my father's dental work. I'd sent that barely a year ago. They hadn't needed my money. They'd just taken it because I was stupid enough to give it. I was a convenient ATM, nothing more. I pulled up Emma's Instagram, photos of her wedding dress, designer, easily $4,000. Posts about the venue, the flowers, the menu. My mother had shared details in the comments. We want everything perfect for our baby girl's special day. They'd been planning this for over a year, saving for it, prioritizing it, while telling me they were financially struggling, while accepting my money without a second thought, while never once considering that I might need help too. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of my own stupidity, and felt something I'd never quite let myself feel before. Rage. Not the hot, explosive kind. Cold rage. The kind that clarifies rather than blinds. For 28 years, I'd made excuses for them. I'd told myself they were flawed but trying, that they loved me in their own way, that I was being too sensitive, expecting too much, needing things I shouldn't need. But this wasn't flawed parenting. This was exploitation. They'd taken advantage of my desperate need for their approval, my pathetic hope that maybe this time they'd see me, and they'd bled me dry while throwing parties for my sister. The wedding invitation sat on my counter, mocking me with its expensive cardstock and careful calligraphy. Family means everything. For the first time in my life, I agreed with my mother. Family did mean everything. And that's exactly why this betrayal was unforgivable. The days after I discovered the truth about the refinancing were strange. I went to work, I answered emails, I attended meetings. On the surface, everything looked normal. But inside, I was different. I wasn't crying. I wasn't falling apart. I was doing something I'd never done before. I was getting angry, and I was staying angry. For my entire life, whenever my parents hurt me, I'd absorbed it. I'd made excuses for them. I'd turned the pain inward and asked myself what I'd done wrong, how I could be better, what I needed to change to finally earn their love. Not this time. This time, I looked at the facts clearly, without the desperate filter of hope that had distorted everything for 28 years. They had lied to me, repeatedly, deliberately. They had exploited my need for their approval to extract money from me while telling me they were struggling. They had taken $22,400 from me over 6 years while sitting on $65,000 from their refinancing. They had prioritized a $40,000 wedding while telling me they couldn't help with my surgery because they were stretched thin. These weren't mistakes. This wasn't neglect born from being overwhelmed or stressed. This was calculated, and I was done pretending otherwise. I started gathering evidence, not for revenge, at least I didn't think of it that way. I told myself I was doing it for clarity, for validation, for my own sanity. When you've been gaslit for long enough, you need proof that you're not crazy, that the things that hurt you actually happened. I went through my bank statements systematically, printing out every transfer I'd made to my parents. I organized them chronologically, noting the dates and amounts. Then I went through my texts and emails, finding every conversation where they'd asked for money. I took screenshots of everything. Mom, March 2019. Honey, I hate to ask, but we're really struggling this month. Could you possibly help with $2,000 for the mortgage? Just until your father's bonus comes through. We'll pay you back, I promise. Dad, July 2020. Sarah, I need dental work urgently. Insurance won't cover it all. Can you spare $1,500? We're good for it. Mom, October 2021. Emma has an opportunity for a summer intensive that could really boost her career. It's $1,800. I know it's a lot, but you've always been so generous. We'll pay you back as soon as we can. I had dozens of these messages. Every single one included a promise to repay. Every single one emphasized how temporary their financial struggle was. Not one mention of the $65,000 sitting in their bank account. I cross-referenced the dates with their social media posts. Facebook photos of my parents on vacation in Florida, posted 2 weeks after they'd asked me for money because they were behind on bills. Instagram stories from Emma at an expensive dance workshop, the same month they'd told me they were cutting back on everything. The evidence was damning. Not because I was twisting anything or taking things out of context, but because the truth was simply there, documented in their own words and actions. I created a folder on my laptop. I labeled it Family Financial Records. I put everything in it: bank transfers, screenshots, social media posts, the property records showing the refinancing. The total came to exactly $22,436. I made a spreadsheet. I was an accountant, after all. Numbers were something I understood. Looking at it laid out like that, dates, amounts, promises made, promises broken, something shifted in me. This wasn't love. This had never been love. Love doesn't exploit. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't take and take and take while giving nothing back. I'd been so desperate for their approval that I'd let them use me. I'd participated in my own mistreatment by staying silent, by accepting their excuses, by hoping things would change. But they were never going to change. The only thing I could change was my response. I also went back through old emails and texts that had nothing to do with money, evidence of a different kind of pattern. My 22nd birthday. No call, no text. I'd finally messaged them that evening. Just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you guys. My mother had responded the next day. Oh, honey, was that yesterday? We've been so busy with Emma's showcase. Happy belated! My college graduation. I'd sent them the date and time months in advance. They'd arrived an hour late, missing my name being called. Traffic was terrible, my father had said. Later, I'd seen Emma's Instagram story from that morning. They'd stopped to take her to brunch first because she had a performance that evening. My promotion to senior accountant. I'd called to tell them, excited for once. My mother had said, "That's wonderful, Sarah." And then immediately, "Oh, speaking of work, Emma just got accepted to that dance company in Chicago. Can you believe it? We're so proud." Every missed event, every forgotten milestone, every conversation that had been redirected to Emma within 30 seconds. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being oversensitive. The neglect was real, documented, undeniable. I put these in the folder too. Not because I planned to use them as weapons, but because I needed to see it all together. I needed to stop gaslighting myself. The panic attack hit on a Wednesday night, a week after I'd started compiling evidence. I was at home, going through old photos on my phone, and I came across a picture from my high school graduation. I was in my cap and gown, holding my diploma, standing alone. I'd asked a teacher to take the photo because my parents had been busy with Emma. I stared at that picture, at my younger self, trying to smile, trying to look happy, so obviously alone, and something in my chest cracked. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might be having a heart attack. I called 911, terrified, certain I was dying. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They were kind and professional, checking my vitals, asking questions. My heart was fine. I wasn't dying. "It looks like a panic attack," the younger paramedic said gently. "Has this happened before?" I shook my head, unable to speak. They recommended I go to the ER just to be safe, to get checked out properly. I agreed, mostly because I was scared to be alone. The emergency room was bright and cold and filled with people having worse nights than me. I sat in a curtained area, hooked up to monitors, feeling stupid and embarrassed. A nurse came in to check on me. Her name tag said Patricia. She looked to be in her 50s, with kind eyes and an air of someone who'd seen everything. "How are you feeling now?" she asked, checking the monitor. "Better." Embarrassed. "Don't be. Panic attacks are real medical events. Your body was responding to real stress." She pulled up a stool and sat down. "Do you want to talk about what triggered it?" I should have said no. I should have just thanked her and kept my mouth shut like I always did. But I was so tired. Tired of holding everything in. Tired of protecting people who'd never protected me. So I told her. Not everything. You can't tell someone everything in a hospital ER. But enough. The wedding invitation, the discovery about the money, the pattern of favoritism and neglect that had shaped my entire life. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Honey, I'm going to tell you something I learned the hard way. You don't owe anyone access to you, not even family, as something." I looked at her, this stranger who'd shown me more genuine care in 10 minutes than my parents had in 28 years. "Family isn't defined by blood," she continued. "It's defined by respect, by showing up, by caring about each other's well-being. What you're describing isn't family. It's exploitation wearing a family mask." "But they're my parents," I said weakly. "I'm supposed to—" "You're supposed to take care of yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup, and honey, you're running on fumes." She was right. I knew she was right. "What do I do?" I asked. "You decide what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. You set boundaries. You stop protecting people who never protected you." She paused. "And you speak your truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." I left the hospital at 2 a.m. with discharge papers and a referral to a therapist. I also left with a decision. I was going to Emma's wedding. I was going to walk into that expensive venue with its 250 guests and its $40,000 price tag. And I was going to tell the truth. Not cruelly, not vindictively, but clearly, calmly, and publicly. Because Patricia was right. I was done protecting them. Done staying silent to keep the peace. Done pretending we were a happy family when we'd never been one. They had carefully constructed a public image. Devoted parents to both their daughters, proud and supportive, making sacrifices for their children. That image was a lie, and I was the only one who could expose it. For 28 years, I'd made myself smaller so they could look bigger. I'd hidden my pain so they could maintain their illusion. Not anymore. I thought about my 15-year-old self, sitting in that police station, waiting for parents who never came. I thought about every missed event, every forgotten birthday, Every time I'd needed them and they'd chosen Emma instead. I thought about the $22,000 they'd taken from me while lying about their financial situation. I was going to that wedding, and for the first time in my life, I was going to stop being invisible. The drive back to my apartment was silent. Jake didn't try to fill the quiet with platitudes or ask if I was okay. He just drove, letting me process. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, and felt strange. Not regret exactly. Not triumph either, just a hollow, exhausted numbness. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that setting it down left me unbalanced. "Do you want me to come up?" Jake asked when we reached my building. "No, I think I need to be alone." I looked at him. "Thank you for being there. Always." He squeezed my hand. "Call me if you need anything. And Sarah, you did the right thing." I wanted to believe him. The consequences started within hours. My phone started buzzing before I'd even gotten my shoes off. My mother's name on the screen, then my father's, then my mother again. I didn't answer. Then the text started. "How could you do this to your sister? You are selfish and vindictive. Call me immediately. You've embarrassed this entire family." I turned my phone to silent and poured myself a glass of wine I didn't drink. Around midnight, Emma called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Sarah?" Her voice was shaky. What just happened?" I told the truth. "About the money? About them asking you for money?" "Yes." There was a long pause. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't. But," she sounded lost, "the police station thing, when you were 15, that really happened?" "Yes." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, trying to process. "I don't understand. Why would Mom and Dad do that?" "You'd have to ask them." "Sarah, Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry." It was the first time anyone in my family had apologized to me. Ever. "It's not your fault," I said, and meant it. "You were a kid. You didn't ask to be the favorite." "But I should have noticed. I should have seen." "How could you? They made sure you didn't." I closed my eyes. "Emma, I don't blame you. I never have. But I can't pretend anymore that we had a normal family. I can't keep protecting them." "I understand." She was crying now. Can we talk? Later, when things settle? I want to understand. I want to." "Maybe," I said. "Eventually. But not right now. I need time." "Okay." A shaky breath. "Your speech didn't ruin my wedding, you know, in case you're worried about that." "I wasn't trying to." "I know. And honestly, part of me is glad you said something. Because I've been thinking about our childhood, about all those times you were just there in the background, and I never questioned it. I should have questioned it." We talked for a few more minutes, careful and honest in a way we'd never been before. When we hung up, I felt something unfamiliar. The possibility of a real relationship with my sister. Not the one we'd had, built on inequality and ignorance, but something new. Maybe. Eventually. Over the next few days, the family fallout intensified. My mother called from different numbers when I blocked her cell. When I didn't answer those, she sent emails. You humiliated us in front of everyone we know. I don't know how you can live with yourself. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? My father's messages were shorter, angrier. What you did was unforgivable. Don't contact us again. You're not welcome in this family. The irony of that, being told I wasn't welcome in a family I'd never truly been part of, would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. But other messages came too. Messages I didn't expect. My Aunt Carol, my father's sister, and Jake's mother called. Sarah, honey, Jake told me what happened. I just want you to know, I believe you. I've seen how they treated you over the years. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. A cousin I'd barely spoken to in years sent a text. I always thought something was off about how they talked about you versus Emma. I'm glad you spoke up. Even some of my parents' friends reached out, quietly, privately, admitting they'd noticed the favoritism, the inequality, but hadn't felt it was their place to say anything. Each message was a small validation, proof that I hadn't imagined it, that other people had seen the truth even when they'd stayed silent. But the most significant messages came from extended family members who'd been at the wedding. My mother's cousin Margaret called me. I've been thinking about what you said, she started, her voice careful. About the money. I lent your parents $5,000 about 3 years ago. They told me they were in dire financial straits, behind on everything. They never paid me back. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. I'm realizing now that I was one of many. They've been borrowing from people across the family for years, always with the same story about struggling financially. She paused. I think you did us all a favor by speaking up. It turned out I wasn't the only one they'd exploited. I was just the only one who'd documented it and spoken publicly. My parents tried to control the narrative. I heard through Jake that they were telling people I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I was jealous of Emma, that I'd always been difficult, and they'd tried their best with me. But it didn't work the way it would have if I'd confronted them privately. Too many people had been there. Too many witnesses had seen the evidence, heard the specifics, watched my parents' faces as the truth came out. And too many people had their own stories of my parents' financial exploitation. The carefully constructed image they'd maintained, devoted parents who'd sacrificed everything for their children, was cracking. Some relatives took their side, of course. Some believed their version of events, or at least pretended to. Family politics are complicated, and not everyone wants to face uncomfortable truths. But enough people believed me. Enough people had seen enough over the years to recognize the truth when they heard it. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For 28 years, my parents had held all the power. They decided which daughter mattered. They decided when to ask for money. They decided the family narrative. Now, I'd taken that power back. Not by being cruel, not by lying or exaggerating, simply by refusing to stay silent anymore. 3 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived. Real mail, handwritten, from my parents. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. Dear Sarah, we've had time to think about what happened at Emma's wedding. We realize now that some of our actions may have hurt you, though that was never our intention. We've always loved both our daughters equally, even if we didn't always show it in ways you could understand. Your timing was hurtful, and your methods were cruel, but we're willing to forgive you if you're willing to apologize for embarrassing us publicly. We think it would be best if we all sat down together as a family and discussed this calmly, without the drama and accusations. We're sure we can work through this misunderstanding. Mom and Dad. I read it twice, looking for any real acknowledgement of what they'd done, any genuine apology, any admission that their treatment of me had been wrong. It wasn't there. May have hurt you. Your timing was hurtful. This misunderstanding. They were still reframing it, still making it about my behavior, my choices, my cruelty, still refusing to take actual responsibility. I filed the letter away without responding. I didn't need their apology. That realization was freeing. For years, I'd been waiting for them to acknowledge my pain, to validate my experience, to finally see me. I'd thought their recognition would heal something in me. But Patricia, the ER nurse, had been right. Healing doesn't come from other people finally giving you what they should have given all along. Healing comes from recognizing your own worth, regardless of whether others see it. I blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked their emails. I made it clear through Jake that I wasn't interested in family mediation or sitting down to discuss the misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. There was a pattern of neglect and exploitation that had lasted my entire life. I was done pretending otherwise. The grief hit later, in quiet moments. Not grief for the parents I was losing. I'd never really had them. Grief for the parents I should have had. For the childhood I deserved but didn't get. For the daughter I might have been if I'd grown up feeling valued. That grief was real and painful, and I let myself feel it. But underneath the grief was something else. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing for my parents' approval. I wasn't trying to earn love through usefulness. I wasn't making myself small so Emma could shine brighter. I was just existing, on my own terms, without their voices in my head telling me I wasn't enough. It felt strange, uncomfortable, like learning to walk in a body that had been hunched over for so long that standing straight hurt. But it also felt right. Have you ever had to walk away from family because staying was destroying you? Tell me in the comments, because I think so many of us carry this quietly, thinking we're alone in it. We're not alone. There are so many of us who've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop letting people hurt you, even when those people are supposed to love you most. 6 months later, I stood in my apartment on a Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through windows I'd finally gotten around to putting real curtains on. Small changes, but they felt significant. The space was starting to feel like mine in a way it never had before. Not just a place I existed, but a home I was actively creating. My surgery had gone well. The recovery had been hard, but I'd managed. Jake had been there the day of, driving me to and from the hospital. A friend from work had checked on me daily. I'd hired someone to help with groceries and cleaning for the first 2 weeks. I'd been okay. Not because I was naturally strong or independent, but because I'd learned to ask for help and accept it. That was new. The medical bills had been significant, but I was managing them through a payment plan. It was tight, but doable. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sending money to my parents every few months. My paychecks were actually mine. I'd started therapy 2 weeks after the wedding. My therapist, Dr. Reeves, was patient and insightful, helping me untangle 28 years of conditioning. You learned very early, she'd said in one of our sessions, that your worth was conditional, that you had to earn love through being useful, through not needing anything, through making yourself as small and convenient as possible. Yes. And now you're learning that your worth is inherent, that you deserve care and support simply because you're human, not because you've earned it through service. It sounded simple when she said it. In practice, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I was learning to recognize my own needs without shame, to ask for help without feeling like a burden, to take up space without apologizing. Small things, buying myself flowers without justifying the expense, saying no when people asked for favors I didn't have energy for, spending money on an art class, finally, after years of telling myself it was frivolous. Each choice felt revolutionary in its smallness. My relationship with Emma had evolved into something cautious but real. We met for coffee about a month after the wedding. It was awkward at first. Too much history, too much hurt, too many years of an unbalanced dynamic. But Emma was trying, really trying. "I've been thinking about our childhood," she said, stirring her latte without drinking it. "About all the times you were just there, on the sidelines. I thought that was normal. I thought you were just naturally independent. I learned to be independent because I had to be. I know that now." She looked up at me. "I asked Mom about the money, about the $22,000. What did she say?" "That you offered it, that they never forced you." Emma's expression was pained. "But Sarah, I looked at the dates you mentioned. I remember those times. They weren't struggling. They were paying for my workshops, my competitions. They took that money from you while spending thousands on me." "Yes." "That's not okay. That's not—" She blinked back tears. "I benefited from their exploitation of you. I didn't ask for it, but I benefited." "I know. But Emma, you were a kid. Then you were a young adult who didn't know any better because they never told you. You're not responsible for their choices." "But I should do something. You're doing it now. You're acknowledging the truth. You're not making excuses for them. That's more than they've ever done." We were building something new, a sisterhood based on honesty instead of the roles our parents had assigned us. It was fragile, but it was real. She told me she'd started seeing a therapist too, working through the pressure of being the golden child, the one who'd been given everything but also expected to be everything. "They put their dreams on me," she said. "Every competition, every performance. It wasn't just about me succeeding. It was about them being successful parents. The pressure was suffocating." I'd never thought about it from her perspective. Emma had gotten the attention, the resources, the pride, but she'd also gotten the weight of their expectations, their need for her to validate their sacrifices. We'd both been damaged by their favoritism, just in different ways. I'd started painting again, real painting, not just sketching in notebooks like I'd done as a kid. The community art class I'd joined met twice a week in a bright studio that smelled like turpentine and coffee. I was terrible at first, clumsy, out of practice, self-conscious. But I kept going. My instructor, Marcus, was in his 60s with paint-stained hands and an encouraging smile. "Art isn't about being good," he said when I apologized for my shaky brushstrokes. "It's about expressing something. You're expressing just fine." I painted abstract things at first, colors and shapes that represented feelings I couldn't name. Then I started painting memories. Not realistic scenes, but emotional landscapes. One canvas was all grays and blues with a small figure at the edge. My 15-year-old self, alone in that police station. Another was bright and chaotic, swirls of color with two figures. Emma centered and whole, me half-formed and translucent. Marcus never asked what they meant. He just said things like, "bold choice," and "interesting use of negative space." Painting was therapy in a different way. It gave me a place to put all the feelings I'd never been allowed to express. My apartment was changing too. I'd hung my paintings on the walls, not because they were good, but because they were mine. I'd bought plants and actually kept them alive. I'd replaced my old, uncomfortable couch with one I actually liked. The second bedroom, which had been empty except for storage boxes, was becoming something else. An office, a studio, a space that was just for me and my interests. I'd always lived minimally, keeping my spaces temporary and easily abandoned, like I might need to leave at any moment. Now, I was putting down roots. One afternoon, Jake came over to help me assemble a bookshelf I'd ordered. "This is nice," he said, looking around at the changes. "It looks like someone actually lives here." "Someone does now." He smiled. "How are you doing? Really?" "Better. Not perfect, but better." "Good. You deserve better." We'd grown closer in the months since the wedding. Not just cousins, but actual friends. He'd proven that family could be chosen, that biology didn't determine loyalty. I'd met his girlfriend, Sarah, yes, confusing, who was warm and funny and immediately made me feel welcome. I'd started going to their place for dinner occasionally, experiencing what healthy family dynamics actually looked like. My parents sent one more letter about 4 months after the wedding. This one was different, shorter, less defensive. "Sarah, we've had time to reflect. We realized that our apology in the last letter wasn't adequate. You deserved better from us, not just recently, but throughout your childhood. We don't expect you to forgive us or to want a relationship with us, but we wanted you to know that we see now, at least partially, how our favoritism toward Emma affected you. We're sorry for the pain we caused, though we know that doesn't undo it. If you ever want to talk, we're here, Mom and Dad." It was better than the first letter, more honest, closer to a real apology. But it was also too little too late. I appreciated the acknowledgement. It meant they'd at least been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about themselves. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd stopped waiting for their validation. I'd stopped needing them to understand my worth before I could believe in it myself. Dr. Reeves had said something in therapy that stuck with me. Closure doesn't come from other people giving you what they should have given you all along. It comes from accepting what was, grieving what should have been, and choosing to build something different going forward. I was building something different. I'd made new friends through the art class. People who didn't know my history, who just knew me as Sarah, the quiet one who painted emotional landscapes and always brought good snacks. One of them, Melissa, a different Melissa than the one who'd betrayed me at 15, invited me to her birthday dinner. "It's nothing fancy," she said. "Just a few people at my favorite restaurant. I'd love if you came." I went. I bought her a thoughtful gift. I stayed for the whole evening, laughing and talking and being present. No one forgot I was there. No one made me feel invisible or secondary. It was such a small, normal thing, a birthday dinner with friends. But for someone who'd spent her childhood at the edge of family photos, it felt radical. The biggest change was internal. I was learning to trust my own judgment, to believe my own experiences without needing external validation. For years, I'd second-guessed every hurt feeling, every moment of pain. Was I being too sensitive? Was I asking for too much? Was I imagining the favoritism? Now I knew. I hadn't been imagining anything. My experience was valid. My pain was real. That knowledge was power. I set boundaries in all my relationships now. When a colleague asked me to take on extra work that wasn't my responsibility, I said no without apologizing. When a friend repeatedly canceled plans at the last minute, I told her it bothered me instead of just accepting it. I was learning that I could be kind without being a doormat, that I could be generous without being exploited, that I could ask for my needs to be met without being selfish. These lessons felt basic, things other people seemed to know instinctively, but I was learning them at 29, and that was okay. Better late than never. 6 months after the wedding, on a quiet Sunday morning, I thought about my 15-year-old self, the scared girl sitting in that police station, waiting for parents who never came. If I could go back and talk to her, I'd tell her, "You're going to be okay. This isn't your fault. The love you're desperate for isn't something you can earn, because it should never have been conditional in the first place." I'd tell her, "You're going to spend years trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. You're going to give too much and accept too little. You're going to believe their narrative that you're the problem. But eventually, you're going to learn the truth. You're going to learn that some people, even parents, are incapable of the love you deserve. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're limited. Because they chose favorites. Because they prioritized image over honesty. And you're going to learn that you can survive their rejection. That you can build a life without their approval. That you can be whole even when they made you feel fractured. You're going to save yourself, and it's going to be hard and lonely and terrifying. But it's going to be worth it. I stood in my apartment, looking at the life I was building. The artwork on the walls, the plants by the window, the bookshelf Jake helped me assemble, the savings account that was finally growing because I wasn't sending money to people who'd never appreciated it. Evidence of a life lived on my own terms. I thought about the wedding invitation that had started all of this, the catalyst that had finally pushed me to speak my truth. I didn't regret what I'd done. Not the confrontation, not the public nature of it, not the broken relationship with my parents. Because staying silent, continuing to protect them, continuing to make myself small, would have been its own kind of death. A slow disappearing of the self until nothing was left but the role they'd assigned me. I'd chosen myself instead, and that choice had consequences: grief, loss, uncomfortable freedom. But it also had gifts: self-respect, authentic relationships, the possibility of real healing. The final lesson I learned, the one I wish I'd known at 15, at 25, at any point before 28. Your worth is not determined by the people who fail to see it. You can be lovable and still be unloved by the people who should love you most. You can be valuable and still be undervalued by your own family. Their blindness is not your failure. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do, the most loving thing, is walk away from people who only love you conditionally. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, by showing up, by caring about each other's well-being. I lost my family of origin, but I gained something more valuable: the family I chose. Jake, Emma in a new way, friends who actually saw me, a therapist who helped me heal, even Marcus at the art class who celebrated my terrible paintings. People who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. And most importantly, I gained myself. The person I might have been if I'd grown up valued. The person I was becoming now that I'd stopped performing for approval. She was quieter than I expected, gentler with herself, more willing to take up space. She was still learning, still healing, still occasionally slipping into old patterns of making herself small. But she was free. And that freedom, the freedom to exist fully, to speak truthfully, to stop protecting people who never protected her, was worth everything I'd lost to gain it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the overlooked child or the family member who gave until there was nothing left, I want you to know you're not alone. Your pain is valid. Your truth matters. And you deserve better than conditional love. You deserve to be seen.